Welcome to the Parent Show on Radio Verulam 92.6 FM. I'm Lydia Elcoury.
And I'm Shirley Heyman.
Now, on tonight's show, it'll be of great benefit to anybody who thinks their children might perhaps be hyperactive. And we're fortunate to have an excellent lineup of experts in the studio who are ready to share their experience and the knowledge around the subject of hyperactivity and children who generally won't sit for too long, who won't sleep very well, who break toys, furniture, and whose eating habits are difficult to cope with.
Yeah, and tonight, Lydia, we've got, as you said, some great guests. We've got Lauren Gayfer in, who's a local mum, but also an experienced nutritionist. And Lauren is the owner of the Fairy Food Mother company, and it's based in Redbourne. And we've also got Anne Ross, who's also another local mum, but as well as that, she's a specialist in ADHD, ASD. She's a behavioural psychologist, a coach, a trainer. Oh my goodness, lots of things. And she is the director of the charity Advance. And then we've got Pam Clarke, haven't we, Lydia, as well, who's a sleep trainer and expert, and she lives locally too.
That's it.
So between all of us, what we're going to try and do this evening is explore some of these challenging parenting issues that, many of us, or indeed I guess lots of us at some stage, are going to face during our parenting careers. So welcome to all of you, and thank you very much for coming in tonight. So Lydia, tonight's show really is all about responding, isn't it, to a message that we had sent into the Parents Show by a local family.
That's it. And as you know, that's exactly what the Parent Show is here for. We love responding to listeners' questions and queries and worries, and finding the best people possible to answer their questions. So I'll just run through the message that we got from our listener. He says, the bottom line is we have this 17-month-old little boy who's seriously pushing mum and dad to the limit. He sleeps 10 to 12 in the morning and then is put to bed at 7 p.m. He is always up and awake again at 11 p.m, 2 a.m. and 5 a.m. to play. Mum, who's at the end of her tether, gives him milk to get him back to sleep and also sleeps with him. Mum and dad are feeling totally drained. He eats porridge in the morning and meat, soup, potatoes rest of the time. He eats at 6 p.m. every night, never sits to play with toys, and his attention span, even for baby TV, only lasts for a few minutes. During the day, he needs to be watched constantly. He pulls wires from TV, smashes eggs at the market, smashes anything within his reach. He hates being in the pram, constantly struggles to get out and run away from us. He never looks out to see where his parents are. Generally, he's friendly to people and also notices that he hates to be confined. He climbs out of his cot all the time.
So, quite a detailed message there that we received. And the parents even then went on to ask us, is he normal? Is he hyperactive? Is he just badly behaved? What is the link between hyperactivity and sleep deprivation? Is he too young to be diagnosed with ADHD? And if that was the diagnosis, well, then what next? So, wow, there's a lot there, isn't there, really, to pick apart. Anne, can we sort of start with you? How do you respond to that description that Lydia just read out for us of that 17-month-old?
Well, I think it's plain that a lot of parents will certainly feel that that's probably like their child. It's very common for a young child to act in this way, especially at 17 months. But to have all those things in one child, I think, is probably the most difficult thing for these parents. When they're comparing themselves and their child to other families that they're undoubtedly meeting, they're finding that maybe they're struggling with things that others aren't. And that's the problem for them. It's, at 17 months, sleep problems can still be a problem. Sometimes children will sleep within weeks of being born. But I think one of the things that we have to take on board here is that obviously this child, for these parents, is a problem.
Right.
And we have to take that into consideration. That is the biggest thing. The parents have come and said, help. Fantastic. Good for them, really.
So, yeah, Lydia, what do you feel?
And I mean, that's the most important thing, is that you do reach out in a case like that. But in your opinion, Anne, can you even say a child has ADHD at 17 months? At what point can you say it is? And what would you advise?
Definitely, you can't say it's ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, at that age. The requirements are that the child must be at least 5 years old, and new guidelines that have literally just been issued last month suggests that anything up to 12 years old, but certainly not before 5. It's very important that this child is monitored and not identified yet. It's far too young.
Thank you very much, Anne, for that, because, Lydia and I know a little bit about people working in nurseries. Absolutely. And, sometimes you do hear that term bandied around, oh, that child's got ADHD. And really you're telling us, aren't you, that that's not a diagnosis that someone's going to get before they leave nursery.
No, it's very difficult at this age to distinguish between ADHD symptoms or behaviours and what could be considered to be normal at this age. A child who's maybe 12 and has temper tantrums you wouldn't expect, but a child of 2 you would. And of course he's very close to 2. And the things that they're talking about, throwing eggs in the market and being disruptive, is pretty much like you would expect of a 2-year-old going through the terrible twos.
So it would be more detrimental to your child to give it any kind of a label at this point. What you wanted to do is look for solutions to the various issues that are kind of arising in this child's behaviour.
Absolutely. I think one of the things that's happening here is that a variety of symptoms are being put together and a conclusion is being sought, when in fact each one is a symptom in itself at this stage and needs to be looked at like that, but holistically for the child. So everything is looked at individually but also together.
Thank you, Anne. That's so helpful. I just wondered, is there any way that your charity can help parents of young toddlers like this?
We're very, very keen to be involved with families who would like to get more information at this stage. The earlier the identification, the better the outcome. And we're not looking for the assessment, we're not looking for the diagnosis, but if parents are clued up, they have the information, they get the education they need, they're asking for, that's what we're about. So we're very welcoming to families to come to us for information, and they can attend our support groups for that without, at this age, no problem at all.
Okay. So if people were to look you up, on the web, and they looked up ADD-France, they'd find where their local support group was.
They would.
Yeah.
We have 2 in Hertfordshire.
Yeah.
As I said, nobody needs to book. They just turn up. They just come along, and they'll be very welcome.
Yeah. Okay. That's great. Thank you. Let's bring in Lauren now, the nutritionist. I mean, Lauren, do you think that certain foods impact on children's energy levels?
Sure, yes, thanks, Shirley. There are indeed a number of foods which can have either a positive or an adverse effect on children's energy levels. And when we're looking at behavioural issues in particular, one of the key nutritional considerations is to balance their blood sugar levels. So quite often hypoglycemia or low blood sugar is an issue with children who've got behavioural problems, these young children. And what we do to address this is to minimise the amount of sugar that they consume on a day-to-day basis in their foods and drinks. And there is an enormous amount of hidden sugars in foods that are particularly marketed to children, which is, the most frightening thing. And even some of the foods that are labelled as healthy or organic or whatever it might be, fruit sugars that have got, rice syrup or, glucose fructose syrup or, fruit sugar. It's just another word for sugar, basically, and it has the same physiological effect on the child. So when we're looking at foods that perhaps have a lot of hidden sugars, things like breakfast cereal, some of the worst culprits on the market. And, these are targeted at children with funky characters and jingly jangly, jingles and all the rest of it.
Such attractive boxes, that's the problem. I mean, with so many of the cereals, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And toys in them.
Yes, toys, you're pushing your children down the cereal aisle and, they're not going to want to go for the boring grey packet of, guinea pig food. They want the bright one with the tiger on.
Absolutely.
And the sad thing is that the bright one with the tiger on has got up to 7 teaspoons of sugar.
7
7 teaspoons. So 7 teaspoons of sugar in a bowl. I mean, you don't want to start your child on that kind of breakfast at the beginning of the day. So really trying to look at, what's in foods, learn to read labels, learn to understand how much sugar is in food. And if you just go by, the simple equation that 5 grams equals 1 teaspoon, you can work out exactly how much sugar is in a particular food item. Yogurts are another one, the lovely pre-packaged pink and yellow and what have you, yogurts, full of hidden sugars. I'd urge parents to stick with natural yogurt and sweeten it with a little bit of honey if they feel feel they need to, and then you can control the amount of sugar that's going into the food, or just mash up a banana or some fresh raspberries. Then you're getting nutrients and good protein and good fats in there as well.
Lauren, would you go so
Sure.
far as to say that if you have a child who seems to be a little bit more active than his friends, that you just cut out sugar? I mean, literally any kind of added. Really, okay.
I would. I mean, yeah, absolutely. It's pretty difficult in a small child. You know, they're going to be invited to parties, they're going to be invited to play dates, they're going to be invited to their granny's house and all that kind of thing. And it's very difficult. And I appreciate that with young children. But if, you know, you're at home and you can do it 80% of the time, give them a packed lunch and all the food that you feed them at home is completely sugar-free, then it is going to have a significant impact on their behaviour. Absolutely.
One of the other issues, Lauren, that comes up, you know, with the family that wrote into us was this drinking of milk at night. And I know that I certainly did that with my daughter. I'd give her a bottle of milk to soothe her. I mean, do you have any opinions on that?
Yeah, I mean, you know, there's a number of issues that kind of come up here. Obviously, this little child is only, 17 months old, so he's still, little. But by that stage, you would hope that, he was sleeping through the night or able to get through the night without the need for extra calories or extra nutrients. And what this might be doing is kind of spoiling his appetite for real food and a real variety of food during the day. So if he's having 2 or 3 cups of milk at night, he might not be hungry for a decent breakfast in the morning. And then you're kind of on a vicious circle of constantly chasing your tail. He's waking up in the night and perhaps he's hungry. The other thing also is that I understand these parents are clearly desperate, and I work with a lot of parents, and I try and make it realistic for the mums and dads, because ultimately when you're desperate you'll try anything, and if it works you're going to stick to it. So I wouldn't want to try and berate them in any way for doing what they're doing. But I think one of the other issues that comes up for me is that dairy is very often a problem in terms of a food allergy for children with behavioural problems. And by adding an extra couple of cups of milk in the middle of the night, you're really kind of adding to the load of dairy that they're getting. So perhaps they could just try and wean them off the cow's milk by just slowly introducing a non-dairy milk, like an unsweetened almond milk or some oat milk, and just diluting it gradually over the course of a couple of weeks until the child gets used to the taste of a slightly different milk.
Right.
And then perhaps reducing the volume that they're getting again slowly over the course of a couple of weeks or up to a month until they're
that's really good advice, isn't
used
it,
to
Lydia?
having something different.
Absolutely. And could I just jump back to something you said there, Lauren?
Sure.
If you are cutting out sugar, and there's a mid-morning lull and there's a mid-afternoon lull in energy, what would you do? Can you give us some healthy options instead of children and adults in fact do need to eat regularly, and when you think a child's had if they've started the day on a sugary bowl of cereal, by mid-morning they are going to be starving, they are going to be having a blood sugar crash, and they do need a little snack. So they definitely need to have kind of mid-morning, mid-afternoon snacks. Alternatives would be a piece of fruit with some natural yogurt, some little oat cakes or rice cakes with some mashed avocado or some hummus, or perhaps a nut butter. Almond butter is a nice alternative to peanut butter, which can often be a problem. Peanuts can often be a problem for these children. So always looking to add some protein with their snacks as well. Excellent. That's a great tip, because I think part of the kind of giving a chocolate biscuit or something like that, you think, they need a little bit of energy. It's easy. There's no prep in it, and it's so easy to just kind of hand it over. But like you say, equally, a piece of fruit, just wash it, hand it over.
Absolutely. There's very little prep in an oat cake and some hummus.
Great. Indeed.
Tonight we're trying to unpick some of the issues around hyperactive children. Lydia, what did we find when we were sort of researching this?
Well, one of the topics that have arisen in our research over the last couple of weeks is that a child being diagnosed is that of a child being diagnosed with ADHD.
Yeah, if a child is hyperactive, it doesn't necessarily mean that they've got ADHD, but they kind of link them a lot when you're looking at it on the web and you're reading into things and you're speaking about people. They kind of say the two things are the same. Anne, what do you say?
This is a common misconception. There are 2 types of ADHD, and often it's the girls that go undiagnosed because they don't have this apparent external hyperactivity. But with most people who have ADHD, they also have a very hyperactive brain, which means they're interested in lots of things all the time, which often means in young children, that's why they can't sit still even to watch a children's TV programme. They're on the go looking for more stimulation for their hyperactive brain.
Right.
So they appear to be hyperactive of body, and a lot of the girls will sit still, but their mind, their eyes, their vision, their hearing, every sense is all over the place. So this hyperactivity is inbuilt. It's not part of the food, but food can still affect these children like any other child.
Okay, so, say a family think that potentially it is something more than, normal hyperactive behaviour. Kind of who are the people that are going to determine that for the child? Where does the parent go?
Not just anybody can assess and diagnose,
No.
and it's a very, very important thing. The child will obviously meet the education system first, and some teachers will try and diagnose a child. They might see symptoms, and that's fair enough, like all of us, but it can only be a consultant, either a consultant paediatrician for a very young child, or maybe a consultant psychiatrist, depending on which service they get entered into. But generally, the first port of call is the GP.
Okay.
So the family's local GP.
So they go to the GP, then the GP would recommend, that the child sees one of these consultants that you're talking about. What happens to the child then? Because that was one of the family's concerns. If the child is diagnosed, what next? I think they're sort of scared, really, understandably, in case it could possibly be that.
I think it's a very common thing, fear of the unknown, but also fear of a diagnosis. What will happen to my child if my child does get a diagnosis? The good thing is that the situation in Hertfordshire is a very good one. It varies from east to west Herts, but
Right.
generally speaking, the service is good within the health service. And although families might have to wait a while to see somebody, when they do, they can see a variety of people who can then assess the child and look for what traits there are there, what behaviours are there, talk to the school or nursery, talk to various people, and of course talk to the family, talk to the parents, and then make a decision.
So, Anne, can I just sum up what I think I've heard? So, if we're talking about ADHD, absolutely no diagnosis before 5. Is there support before 5, or you just wait until the child turns 5 and then you go to your GP?
No, they don't need to wait until 5. It's very important that they are assessed for need early on. So go to the GP, ask for help, and the GP may have other resources which they can direct them towards to get additional help and support. They may even get referred to the community services, who may do a preliminary assessment so the child is at least in the system, so to speak, and that people are aware of the difficulties the family are going through, because there's so much out there that can help them.
And if you're a parent and you suspect maybe your child doesn't have ADHD but is very active, but you're not sure you'd be ready to call them hyperactive, have you got any kind of benchmarks that you could give parents to guide them? You were saying, he won't sit down and watch television. What if your kid will sit down and watch television? Does that mean they're very unlikely to be hyperactive because something can take their attention?
No, not at all.
Okay.
It's very varied. The criteria for assessment are very varied too, and you don't have to meet all the points within the criteria. There are some children that will focus for a long time on one subject because it interests them, whereas other subjects is a bit like, if you like maths but you don't like history, you'll focus on maths but you won't focus on history. What you need is somebody who will attract you to that subject, and if it's attractive, you'll be focused. And people with ADHD can focus if they want to, if it's interesting enough, but they're constantly looking for something that's interesting.
And so, Anne, you said the difference between boys and girls potentially, and we used to talk about ADD, I think. Is that right?
Yes, some consultants still do talk about
Right.
ADD, and this varies from country to country. In this country, the preferred term now is ADHD.
Right.
And the H, as I said, sometimes is a little bit more hidden.
Yes.
But the ADHD brain, certainly in the many years that I've been working in this field, the ADHD brain is a huge issue, especially as people get older, towards the end of teens and into early adulthood. The external hyperactivity, if it was there, diminishes.
Oh.
So many
okay.
adults you wouldn't know. It's very much hidden.
Does that mean that girls sometimes don't get picked up then, or get picked up much later?
Absolutely. the majority that are picked up are boys, purely
Yeah.
because of their external behaviours, which become difficult to manage. So therefore the families are referred. But with girls, they do tend to get forgotten. They do tend to get missed out. And unfortunately, they may have to wait a long time before somebody recognises it. But the system's getting better.
Well, that's good.
And just back to the hyperactivity, I mean, is there anything you can actually do about a child being hyperactive? Is it down to sleep, nutrition, and being aware and treating, being aware of your child's behaviour? What are there solutions?
That's a difficult question because no one size fits all.
Yeah.
It's fair to say that the ADHD brain, because it's so hyperactive, it makes it very difficult to calm down, to go to sleep. And that's what a lot of families report. The child goes very tired into school because they've not had sleep. And as a parent, you can't make your child sleep. There are perhaps tools and strategies which might help, and those are always worth trying. But it's important to try anything that you can, and that's what most parents will do. And certainly before we get to medication or anything like that, there is no right or wrong, in my opinion, on medication. It's about personal choice, and that's a really important issue. But before that, most parents will try many, many other things, including a change of diet.
I mean, that's a good point to bring you back in, Lauren. I know you've got some thoughts on the potential underlying causes of behavioural disorders in children related to nutrition. For example, you mentioned to me about food allergies. I just wondered if you could expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's important to kind of reiterate, or certainly something that, Anne and I were talking about beforehand, is that, there isn't necessarily a cure. It's kind of, ADHD hyperactivity is multifactorial, and it's about trying a number of different things that could help to, lessen the symptoms or, stop halt the progression, stop it from getting worse, that kind of thing.
Right.
And one of the areas that we certainly look at, within nutrition, and one of the most well-researched areas with regards to a link between, with nutrition and, hyperactivity or ADHD is food allergies. Some of the most common culprits, I mentioned dairy previously, can be a problem. Also wheat or other gluten grains like rye or barley. Yeast can be a problem. Shellfish, nuts, peanuts, eggs, soya, those are the sort of the main culprits. I think it's quite important to distinguish though between the two different types of allergies. If your child has what's called an IgE allergy, you'll pretty much know about it. That's where he or she will come up in a reaction immediately, and you'll know about it. The school will know about it. The nursery will know about it. There'll be a list of the things he can and can't have. That's different to the kind of food allergies that are implicated with behavioural disorders, because that's a more of a delayed response. It's an IgG immune response, and it can take anything from an hour up to 3 days to see any symptoms. So these are foods that are going to be consumed on a regular basis, and it's so much harder to pinpoint. But there is testing available. There is IgG testing available, and quite often, eliminating the food itself can really start to help some of the symptoms.
Where do parents go to have IgG testing?
Well, there are a number of different companies that do IgG testing. One in particular called Cambridge Nutritional Sciences do a test called Food Detective, which you can actually do at home. I'd actually recommend doing one called Food Print, which you send off for, and then the lab sends you back a list of kind of red, green and amber foods, the ones that are kind of showing up the biggest response. But the other thing that's kind of worth mentioning is that underneath the food allergy is perhaps a digestive system that isn't working properly. So what you kind of need to do is kind of eliminating the food is only half the issue. It's only kind of half the solution. So by eliminating the food and then using nutritional tactics to heal the digestive system, you could then potentially start to reintroduce the food again at some point later on in life and it not be a problem.
Okay, and is that the kind of work you often do with children, Lauren?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Detecting which foods are a problem, getting them off them, doing a lot of gut healing, and obviously, introducing, the parents to, healthier alternatives, plenty of fruits and vegetables, plenty of, water and, good drinks.
Just briefly before we move on to our next topic of sleep, Lauren, could you give us your website? We'll just
Absolutely,
pop
yes.
it up on Facebook.
Yep, it is www.thefairyfoodmother.com.
That's great. So we've been talking about nutrition, we've been talking about the overall assessment. Now, what role does sleep have to play? But we'll be talking to Pam Clarke from the Child Sleep Company about her opinion. Hi Pam, thank you so much for joining us this evening on the Parents Show. So Pam, we've been talking about ADHD and hyperactivity all evening, and we really want to get your take on the importance of sleep in hyperactivity and ADHD. Can you share your thoughts with us?
Of course, it's a pleasure to be on the show, Lydia. It's a really interesting area for me because increasingly there's more and more evidence that shows that ADHD is linked with a variety of sleep problems, and also the converse of that. Poor sleep has a profound impact on the symptoms of ADHD as well. Interestingly, one study I've seen has found that treating the sleep problems is actually enough to eliminate many of the attention and hyperactivity issues for some children. To the extent, there is this question, some children that are diagnosed with ADHD may actually just be suffering from chronic sleep problems. So for me, if you can make some improvement to a child's sleep that helps them, whether they have ADHD or not, it's going to be of huge benefit to those families.
Well, that must be such a relief to parents out there who are listening, because nobody wants to kind of resort to more extreme solutions, and if it's just a matter of getting sleep sorted, that's quite manageable, isn't it? So
absolutely.
Can you give us any tips, Pam, about how to manage the situation, how to get more sleep for children who have a tendency or could be hyperactive?
One thing that's crucial with children with ADHD, and it applies for all children, but particularly in this case, actually consistency and routine and very clear rules are really helpful, because actually, the more that you make life predictable for these children, the easier they find it to understand what's expected. Now, that is advice I give to all my clients, but it's especially helpful for children with ADHD. There's also a lot that can be done in terms of helping these children learn techniques to wind down and to calm themselves a little bit. So some of it's about the environment that you create for them. Some of them is about limiting screen time, which can be very stimulating for a child. Some of it is about the things that you feed them. There are particular foods which are very helpful to produce the hormones that make us feel sleepier, oats and chicken and bananas and those kind of things that are great for that kind of thing. So there's lots of different things that you can do to help a child just find it a little bit easier to sleep.
And you mentioned screen time, limiting screen time. Would you say eliminate screen time in the afternoon, evening? Is that too extreme?
I generally say not within an hour of bedtime, but I think if you've got a child that's really, really struggling, make that 90 minutes and see if that helps. The light from the screen is just so stimulating, and it inhibits the production of the hormone melatonin, which makes us feel sleepy. So actually, if you take that away and you give the child some nice quiet time, maybe sitting down and looking at a book or doing a quiet game together or something, interaction with the parent is probably really helpful as well in that time, because it's a bonding thing, which is again a key part of a bedtime routine. But if you take the screen time out of it, that's one thing that you've eliminated that won't be creating a problem for you.
That's fantastic. And I mean, do you recommend everything be done up in the bedroom? How soon would you kind of retire to the bedroom with your child?
You don't want the final part of the bedtime routine to drag on too long. It's got to have a little bit of pace about it, otherwise the child doesn't really know where it's going. So I generally say about 20-30 minutes ultimately, sort of upstairs and in the bedroom, and a warm bath is really good. That always makes us feel a little sleepier. And then into the bedroom and maybe dim the lights a little. And I'm a massive, massive fan of blackout blinds, especially with this beautiful sunny weather that we're getting now. So, pull your blackout blinds down, dim the lights, have some nice quiet time, look at a book, sing a song or whatever it is that you want to do. But yeah, all of those things can be really helpful. But you don't want the routine to drag on indefinitely, because if it goes on too long, it loses its way away a little bit, and the child can get second wind. So keep it to about 20-30 minutes.
That's fantastic help, because I would have assumed the longer you kind of keep them up there, the more they realise that it's inevitable, that's where they're going, it's bedtime, you know.
I know, I think it can lose the focus a little bit. And the other problem, you don't want it going on too long, because the huge risk, especially for a child that's already got a chronic sleep problem, is that they get overtired. And this is then where the child gets this kind of second wind, and they get wired, and then they get all the symptoms that you see for ADHD are so closely linked. They get really sort of hyperactive, find it really difficult to concentrate and sit still, and they get sort of more emotional or more, rough, and, all those things. You don't want them getting overtired. So, keep it relatively short and sweet, and get them into bed before they get to that point of being overtired.
Brilliant. That's a great help. Now, Pam, we shared with you a question we had from a listener who's concerned about a 17-month-old boy. Yep. Just to summarise, he sleeps 10 to 12 noon, 10 to midday in the mornings, and is put to bed at 7. He's always up and awake again at 11 p.m, 2 a.m, 5 a.m. to play.
Yeah.
He gets sleep and he gets milk and goes back to sleep. Have you got any advice for the parents of this 17-month-old boy?
Yes, absolutely. It's very difficult at this stage. It's really difficult to know whether this child has ADHD, because he's obviously on the young side to be formally diagnosed. But without doubt, he is definitely suffering from poor sleep, and that will be having an effect on his behaviour. So the things that I would be looking at to improve his sleep from a behavioural perspective, and to help the parents with some of the things I spoke about earlier, I would look at getting him to eat earlier in the evening. He's eating at 6, and then he's going to bed at 7, and so you need to give the body a little bit more time to digest food. So I'd bring his tea time forward, maybe till around 5, so he's got a little bit longer for the food to digest. And if they're worried that he may get hungry, a little snack like an oat cake or something that helps to boost the hormones that will make him feel sleepy, that could be a good thing to give him as he has his milk just before he goes down for bed. But avoid sugar, because sugar is a massive stimulant, so no sugar at all at tea time. Then I think a really consistent bedtime routine will be very helpful. And as we said before, absolutely no screen time in the last hour, possibly even the last 90 minutes. Make it very consistent routine. ADHD children absolutely thrive on routine. It helps it make it very clear for them what's happening and what to expect, and gives them it's easier for them to wind down if they know what to expect. Then they need to think about the bedroom environment. They need to make it relaxing and conducive to sleep. So as I said before, darkened, nice and quiet. They can put some music on in the bedtime routine, but I turn it off once he goes into bed. And you want it to make it a place that's for sleep, not for play. Because my concern is that in the night he's waking up to play, because he's got a sense that his bedroom is a play place. You need to take that out. It's just a place for sleeping. That will make it easier for him to understand what's expected of him there. And it's really crucial. He's ever so little. They need to get a cot that he can't climb out of. You can get ones which have got higher sides. Travel cots are harder for a child to get out of. They just need to find a solution. He is far too young to be roaming around on his own, and that really bothers me that he escapes. So they need to sort that out so that they can keep him in there and know that he is safe. Now, the other thing that will improve his sleep massively is helping him learn to resettle without external intervention. At the moment, he's got 2 massive incentives to wake up. One is the milk in the night, and one is getting taken into bed with mum. So they need to wean him off those things. And I would suggest that they use what I call a gradual retreat approach to help him make that transition. It means they start in the room with him, and then they gradually withdraw as he gets more used to doing it himself. But the trouble is, every time mum goes back to those sleep props, then he's just got an incentive to wake, and it will just will make the problem worse. He will get tireder and tireder, and his behaviour will get worse and worse and worse. So those are the main things I would say from a behavioural point of view. But I would also get him checked out just to make sure there isn't a medical cause underlying his sleep problem. For example, sleep disordered breathing, also known as sleep apnea. That's one thing that causes problems when a child is sleeping, that then makes them sleep very, very restlessly. It means they get poor quality sleep. So it's worth them getting that checked out as well.
Brilliant, Pam. That's such great help. I'm sure they'll be delighted. Can we just get your website briefly before we let you go?
www.childsleepcompany.co.uk.
Thanks a million, Pam.
Lovely to speak to you, Lydia.
You too. All the best.
Cheers, bye.
Bye.
So there we heard from Pam Clarke, a local sleep trainer. Anne and Lauren, you're listening to that and nodding and chatting. Anything you want to add, Anne, to that? Did you agree with what Pam was saying, or?
I think there's a great deal in there that I would certainly agree with for every child, really. Routine, predictability, calming atmosphere, all those sort of things. No television before bed, and I would certainly suggest an hour and a half is a good time limit to put on that. It's too stimulating. The brain gets overstimulated. A true ADHD child, you would have trouble with some of the things that she was talking about, and I think for some parents that is part of the issue, is that they don't meet the same parenting or strategies that some people might suggest, and that's where the parents really need additional specialist help, and that's what we can help them with.
Thank you. So people can, come to your website, can't they, as we said? ADD.
Yes, they can. They can come to the website www.add-vance.org, or they can ring our helpline, but all the information's on the website.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you. And Lauren, what about you? I saw you nodding at some of the things. What was your response to Pam?
Yeah, I mean, Pam mentioned bringing the little boys supper time earlier a little bit, and I would agree with that. I think 6 o'clock is quite late to, even for adults, you don't want to eat at 10 p.m. And go to bed at 11. So sort of bringing the supper time earlier a little bit to about 5 o'clock, give the body the chance to digest the food. Absolutely agree. Nothing remotely sugary prior to bedtime, and even artificial sugars. So be very, very wary of the no added sugar squashes that seem to be everywhere. The aspartame in that is equally, if not more dangerous than the sugar itself. So just be very wary of that.
So aspartame is a swear word when you're feeding kids.
Yes,
absolutely.
All children, not
really,
just children.
Really,
yes, it
just
makes me completely cringe. I can't bear it. And it's marketed to children, and I understand that parents think that they're doing right by not giving them sugar, so they're thinking this is healthier because it's not got any sugar in. But really, just flip over the label and read what's in it. Do you recognise any of the words? Can you pronounce them? Can you spell them? No. And if you can't, then don't give it to your children.
So are fresh juices safe?
Fresh juice, a little bit of, highly diluted, not from concentrate, apple juice, for example. If they need to have a little bit of sweetness in their drink, if they're not just going to drink water, I would say would be absolutely more preferable than giving them squash. And just get them used to not having such a sweet drink by gradually reducing the amount of juice in the water.
I'm totally I've shot myself in the foot. I've got to the stage now where my kids will hardly drink water without a splash of squash in it. And it is very hard to undo it, because you think, okay, well, I'd rather they drink this, even if you only put a splash in.
Yeah, I'd rather they had the fluid than nothing at all.
Exactly, exactly. And it's become so unappealing. But none of the kind of cordial none of those are completely natural. Is that
no, I mean, certainly the kind of the mainstream ones aren't. There are some more other brands that you can perhaps get from the more expensive supermarkets. I think there's one called Rocks, which is a kind of organic cordial, which is really just made from fruit juice from concentrate and sugar, I think, but at least it hasn't got any sort of nasty E numbers and colourings and aspartame in it. Again, really, really diluted. Yeah. If they have to have something sweet in their drink, not for behavioural issue children. Really steer clear of the squashes and the cordials.
Great to know.
Yeah, thank you both so much. You've given us so much in such a short time, and we could talk to both of you, couldn't we,
till
Lydia?
Yeah,
there's so much more I want to ask really about my teenagers' diet. But anyway, thank you so much for sharing with us. Thanks very much for coming in.